All right, welcome to the Planetary Interaction P2 to P4 guide. So we're going to do two different setups here today. We're going to do a easy lower skill version where you only need Command Center upgrades 4 and a more advanced version with Command Center upgrades 5, which you need for the majority of P4s to make. So first, a few things to go over beforehand. We are going to go, here's your fit for the epithal. You don't need any extra skills to train into other than your Galente Industrial 1. I recommend having at least Galente Industrial 3 if you're going to be doing more than a couple of planets. So 5 planets is what you want to shoot for per character. Separately, I just have this little Iteron Mark V because we need to use command centers, and command centers are fairly large at 1000 M3 each, so you need something to haul them out and set them up on the planets. For skills, there's only 3 necessary skills outside of Galente Industrial. I'm doing this on my trade alt here in Perimeter. As you can see, I'm docked in the I Choose You market, which tends to have some P2 stocked in it daily, as well as the low broker's fee, and it's right next to all the perimeter planets, which also now have 1% tax on top of the empire tax instead of the outrageous taxes that they used to have. So that makes things a lot more profitable in high sec if you're going to do P4 factories. So skills that we need: customs code expertise. Right here, 10% per level. So default empire tax is at 10%. So you get that to 5. It drops your tax rate down to 5% plus the lowest level 1% corp tax. So you have a total of 6% tax on the POCO. So that's import and export. That's the only shitty thing about P2 to P4 is that you pay taxes dropping items off into the planet and taking items away from the planet. But really it's negligible, especially with just the 1% tax there. The other 2 skills you need are Command Center Upgrades 5, and I'm going to show you how to do a setup with Command Center Upgrades 4, so don't worry if you don't have the 5 trained yet, and Interplanetary Consolidation 4. You can train it to 5, so you can have 6 total planets because it's 1 plus your skill level. But I've trained all my alts. I have 8 alts doing this. I've trained them all to just 4 because of the extra time it takes and skill injector requirement. Speaking of skill injectors, if you do this on your own on a brand new character, it is roughly 3.5 skill injectors to get all of these things processed. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into it. So first things first, you got to undock. Don't mind any Z's, it's just my push to talk key. It shows up in any of the things. Alright, so we're out in space. Now the nice thing about Citadels is that you can be tethered and do all of your PI movements other than actually picking up or dropping off PI. You can do it all while tethered. You don't need to sit on the POCO and be vulnerable. So what we're going to do is just stop the ship. And we're going to go look at a planet. So you just right click in space, planets. So we're in perimeter. We're going to look at, we're doing barren planets here. Barren and temperate are your factory planets. So we're going to go to planet 1 and planet 2 are the 2 planets we're going to use today. So planet 1, we're going to do our CCU 4. That's the lower skill level layout. So we just right click, view in planet mode, and here we go. This is it. So we're just going to place our command center right in the beginning, and it's going to be a bunch of clicking. I'll walk you through it. But all it is after we do this first setup, you're just going to basically rinse and repeat on each of your respective planets. And just set them up the same way. Keeps things simple and efficient. So your command center doesn't need to be tied to anywhere. It's just if you ever have to go back to your planet, you want it to be right when you load up the planet window. So we place it down and we click submit. So we're ready to go. You can see on our planetary colonies window here, so this is really useful to have. It's this little icon, planetary colonies. So we go down into our business tab and planetary colonies, and you can drag and drop it onto your bar. I recommend doing that if you're going to be doing PI a lot. So in the future, when you need to use stuff, we'll go through how to do this later. So we're on our planet. Let's get it set up now. Again, we don't need to mess with this other than upgrading it. So click on it, and then upgrade, the only one that's colored here. So we're going to pretend that we only have CCU 4, so we're going to take it up to just level 4 here and click upgrade. Important thing about planetary interaction is that you have to always click submit after you do something for it to come into effect. So submit, and there we go, we're ready to go. You see it takes a little bit of money out. Alright, so now what we're going to be doing is we're setting up P2 to P4 chains. So what that means is we're going to be setting down some factories that make P3. We're going to input and drop off the P2 refined commodities, and it's going to turn itself into P3, and then we're going to route that P3 into a storage facility, back out to a P4 factory. This is all automated once you set it up, and then the P4 goes into your spaceport. So again, you just show up at your POCO, your player-owned customs office, and move the P4 up into space, and that's it. Alright, so let's get started. So to make P3, we need some advanced industry facilities, but first we're going to do our spaceports. Again, we're operating on the premise that we have CCU 4, Command Center Upgrades 4. So we're going to have 2 spaceports and a storage facility. Now, these planets, the nice thing about the perimeter planets is that they're very small, so you don't have to worry about links and keeping things as close together, but I'm just used to it. And it also looks a little bit nicer. So we got our 2 spaceports, our storage facility. We can fit 4 high-tech production facilities here in this layout that we're going to do here. So it's the most efficient layout you can do with Command Center Upgrades 4 in a P2 to P4 chain. And to supply those, we need those P3 factories I talked about. So we need 4 per each one of these. So we're going to have 16 total advanced industry facilities. Just bear with me as I click through it. Alright, almost done. So you can see it's not the prettiest looking thing. If you want, you got autism or something, take your time and go through it. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our links. So these are basically pipelines between each facility. Shortcut here is to hold down Control, left click something, and then while you're holding down Control, then release Control and click the destination place. So I'm holding Control, left click, release Control, and then click on the destination. So I'm going to do that. We're going to set up all the links here. They're very straightforward. You don't need to duplicate your links. You just go through. Alright, so one thing to remember, if you choose to do a different setup, the maximum amount of jumps or hops between facilities that an item can do is 6. So we are at that max right here. If you count from this lowest one here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over to the spaceport, which is where we'll drop the P2 off and it'll get routed out here. So that way we know that everything's going to go where it needs to go correctly. Alright, so again, remember we always hit submit. So it saves our thing, takes out some money for the setup. So that's all the money that's required. It was what, 12.5 mil for this setup. And I think it's like 100,000 for the command center to buy it at Jita, which is one jump away. So next thing we need to do is we need to set up our facilities. So the setup, what you're limited to here, if you only have CCU4, you're limited to 3 different P4s. These P4s only require 2 different P2 or P3s, which is how this is set up here. So if you have a different setup that makes the more advanced P4s, it's might not be as efficient. You'll have to cut off a lot of the P4 factories. So the ones that you can make with CCU4 are Nano-Factory, organic mortar applicators, and sterile conduits. So what we're going to do for this example is the Nano-Factory. So what we do, double click. So we double click on our, remember these ones at the top are our P4 factories, Nano-Factory, install. So that's it, and then we want to route it, so we can double click here as a shortcut instead of clicking that button. So we're going to route the factories, the Nano-Factory item back to the spaceport. So you just double click and then rinse repeat, double click, double click, double click, double click. Now we're going to split it in half so that we don't overload one of our spaceports. So this half of things will go to this spaceport and this half will go over here. Alright, so that's all our P4. It's set up. Submit again. So you can see it's all flashing, meaning it's needing it needs some inputs to get it working. Now, we're not worried about that yet. So now we're going to make the P3s that are going to fuel these P4 factories. So the P3s that we need for Nano-Factory are industrial explosives and Ukomi superconductors. So the first one we're going to do is industrial explosives. Again, half and half. Since there are only 2 different P3s required for this. So this half I'm going to make industrial explosives, and this half I'm going to make Ukomi superconductors. So just bear with me as I click through everything again. So as you can see, this is a different factory. We have our different things here because this is the advanced facility as opposed to the high-tech facility. So a shortcut here, instead of scrolling down like this, all you need to do is just push the first letter. So we're making industrial explosives, so I push I. And there we go. And then you just double click and same process as before. Double click. Now we're going to route all of our P3s, these ones down here, our little worker bees, we're going to move these up into the storage facility. And there's a reason for that, and we'll go over it once we do the rest of the routing. So for now, we're just going to route everything storage facility, move on to the next one. And route. Double click. You probably hear the clicking. Double click that and the route. And I'm going to go through and just do this now. Alright, so that's our 8 industrial explosives. Now we're making our Ukomis. So same process, we just hit U, double click, double click, double click, and rinse and repeat. Alright, so now we have the products from each of these factories routed to their end state. But remember, we still need to funnel all the stuff that we made that's going into the storage facility. We need to funnel that to the P4. So we have some more routing we need to do. But before that, submit. So if we open up our storage facility and click routes, we can see that we have all these incoming. So a good way to double check your routes is to make sure you have 8 of each, right? So we have 8 factories for industrial explosives. We should have 8 routes. So it's 4, 8. Same for Komis, 4 and 8. So we're good. Our routing is good into the storage facility. So now what we do is just click on one of them, create route, and double click. So this is the one where you actually have to click the create route button and then double click out. So we do that to each of the P4 factories. And then same thing for Komis. Go. Alright, so we have that. Again, we can check our routes. So we should have 4 of each outgoing. So here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So our routes are good. Another trick here is to, let's submit real quick so we save our routes. So if you put your mouse cursor over any of these factories or any of these items, it will highlight anything that's that the routes are going to or from. So you can see the storage facility is going to everything. This one's getting routed to the storage facility because it's P3. All of them are, as they should. And then all of these, we can see we have an input coming from the storage facility and the orange on the spaceport because that's where the P4 is going to end up. So now we have one last thing to do on this planet. Since we've already submitted it, we just hit escape. And we're going to go jump into our epithal, our PI hauler. It's built specifically for PI. Alright, so the epithal has its own little special hole for PI. So I already have everything in here. This is for 24 hours of this setup. This is how much you'll need, 1440 of, I'm sorry, that's for the other one we're going to do, 1920 for each of the Nano-Factory P2 requirements. So these are actually the requirements to make the P3, but I refer to it as the P4 since we don't touch the P3 at all. It's all automated. So these here, now the reason reactive metals are twice as much is because it requires 40 per cycle, whereas the others are less. So it actually comes out, you just double whatever your other P2 inputs are, and then you split it up between the two. So it's just shift click and drag, and that's how you split. So let's go ahead and undock. So this is the only time you actually ever need to leave the tether. So we need to go to our station. So good rule of thumb, always turn on your invol. And we're going to go to that planet. Or, sorry, not the planet, the POCO. So customs office, warp to 0. So what we're going to do when we land there is we are going to open up. So we have our little planetary colonies thing, customs window, access customs office. Now you can do all this through this right click menu here, but it's a few more key clicks, and I'm all about efficiency here. So this group of items here we're going to drop off. Once you reach 2,500 meters away, you can drop it. Now if you're a little slow and you don't drop it until after you're stopped, these things that are stacked, I'll show you. If you drop them in, you can see that that stack combines. Now that's just something that's an error or whatever with the PI thing. It's annoying, but you just split it again. So that's all you do. Get there, drop it off, and get out. So you don't want to sit around because you don't want to get ganked, especially if you're running 3 or 4 planets at once. It's about 500 mil worth of stuff. So we'll split it up into the different planet or into the different launch pads. Again, 1920 is for 24 hours using this setup. So what I'm doing is I'm just dragging and dropping over here, and then green we transfer. You can see there's just a little bit of a fee there. And we switch to the next launch pad because we have 2 launch pads on there. Control A to select everything, drag and drop, and transfer. So now everything is on the planet. If we ever want to bring it back up from the planet, let's say we bring up our P4 in a couple of hours, all we do is reverse process. You just bring it up here. So let's pretend this said Nano-Factory, click transfer, and that's it. And again, a little small fee is incurred. And then you come out to the POCO. It's good to just do it all at once. You drop off your P2 and pick up your P4 at the same time. It's the best way to do it. It's most efficient. So that's that. So now we need to route, sorry, I didn't mean to dock. We need to route the P2 into those P3 factories at the bottom. Alright, so we can just double click it. And here we go, planetary view. So it zooms in on where your command center is. So if you put your command center on the back side of the planet, it just takes a little bit longer to do. So it's best to just put it right on the front because it doesn't really matter. I mean, we could look at other people's stuff if we wanted to, but it's not really necessary. And it's not going to impact your setup at all. Alright, so now you can see our spaceports have a few items in it, right? But they're not full, which is good because if they fill up, anything that goes into it gets deleted, and that's bad. So what we're going to do, this is the lengthiest part of the click festing of PI, is routing your P2 into those P3 factories. So remember the left side here is industrial explosives, and those take fertilizer and polytextiles. So that's what we want to find first. So luckily it's on this left hand side. So here's how we do it. So we just double click and then double click. Then open, double click, and you see as I'm doing this, it fills up that first round of, or first batch of factory processing. Now it won't actually start until I hit submit, which we're not going to do until all of this stuff is routed. That way it happens all at once and we don't have any factories lagging behind. Another good thing to save some time here, so you can, if you want to be lazier later on, is split your P2 drop-off even more, split it into quarters, so that way you have polytextiles and fertilizers in both spaceports, and then route from both spaceports. So what that does in the long run is you can just drop off your P2 into whatever launch pad you want, and it will automatically get routed. The way that we're doing it here, you want to put it in that specific launch pad or else it will not get routed. So it's very easy to do if you're still doing the 24 hours, and you can always double check by opening up your planet view and seeing where your routes are. So you just click on the launch pad and see what the routes are. So now we're making Ukomi superconductors over here. So synthetic oil and the superconductors. Another trick, if you're doing a bunch of different P4s, is I've noticed that the materials that are made are kind of common sense. So if you're making Ukomi superconductors, you're not going to use fertilizers, right? You're going to use something called superconductors. So it's a little something, kind of helps a little mnemonic memory thing. And the last thing we're going to do is route the reactive metals straight to the P4 factories, because those are required not to make the P3, but it goes directly into the P4 factory. If you ever look at the chart, now you see I misclicked there and I didn't fill it, so you always want to be careful of that. As I was saying, it goes straight in. You can look at the PI charts. Alysii's, Alysii, is a great one for that, to see how it goes, what's required for what. I also have a spreadsheet for sale, which will be linked in the comments, that tells you exactly what you need for everything. I have a video that goes over all of my good stuff. Alright, so now let's move our reactive metals up. So the reactive metals, I'll give you an example of how we would route our P2 to everything. So let's pretend these were P2 factories. I have my reactive metals in this launch pad, and I also have them in this one. So we just double click and route them to everything. So you see we're doubling up on the routes. That means I can drop all of my reactive metals into either launch pad and they will get routed where they need to go without any extra work from me. So it's a little bit more work up front, especially when you're doing the heavier P4s, specifically integrity response drones and wetware mainframes, because they require 9 P2s each. So 9 P2s times triple the routing, so you have 3 spaceports in that example. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of double clicking. Alright, so now we have everything. Everything is routed. We are good to go. So we click submit and everything starts running. So good way to know when you first run your planets is if everything is routed correctly is it stops flashing and you can see that we have a solid line here, so that this is the next hour of production. It's a 1 hour production cycle, so that means it's already preloaded for the next hour of stuff, which means our routes are working correctly. Same with the reactive metals, they're waiting. Now when this fills up in an hour and goes into here, the same shit should happen again. Everything will be nice solid yellow. The goal is to maintain 100% uptime or keep these yellow all the time. So a 24-hour cycle, you'd want to drop everything off around 22 hours. Give yourself some leeway. You can run up to 28 hours in here and not fill up these spaceports. I believe that's 2880 per P2 if you want to do that. 2,880 per P2. And then double that for the P1 reactive metals. So that is it for our very simple CCU4 setup, and now we're going to move on to the CCU5, which is the real meat potatoes of PI. Since we have 8 PI and only 3 of them you can use this method with. So we're going to go ahead and switch back into the Iteron, and now we're going to assume that we have CCU5. So CCU5 enables us, let's take a look again. Command Center upgrades 5, so it gives us a lot more power grid and CPU on the planet, which means that we can use, we're going to have one less P4 factory, but we can make things that require 3 different P3s per P4. I know it's kind of confusing, but again, if you look at that Alysii thing, I'll put a link down in the comments. It'll make more sense. If you compare, say, Nano-Factories to integrity response drones, you can see the difference in amount of work required in setup. After setup's done, the work's the exact same. Alright, same process. Now we're going to go to Planet 2. So Planet 2 and View in Planet Mode. We're going to set up our Command Center right at the very beginning. Click Submit. And now we are CCU5, so all the way up, upgrade. And submit. So CCU5 uses a different layout. I think this layout looks a little bit better. It's 3 launch pads, 3 storage facilities, which aren't necessary, but they're very helpful in identifying problems in your routing in the beginning, as well as if you want to stock up or move. Let's say P3 goes on sale and the price crashes, so you buy an assload of P3. Instead of having to route it all from your launch pad, you just expedite transfer from your launch pad to the spaceport, from your spaceport to the storage facility, and then it's already routed. So you don't have to worry about anything from there. It's a little bit simpler. So, like I said, 3 spaceports, or 3 launch pads, whatever. So we're going to leave some space here between your CCU or your command center and where we're starting here. So 3 launch pads. Again, it's not necessary to keep everything super tight until you get to planets that are a radius of 10,000 kilometers. So a way to do that, show info on the planet here. You can do that through this window or the other one. And our radius is right here. So 4,000 is fine. Anything around 10,000, you're going to want to be careful. There are a few planets in my home system in Horde that are over that I still use. All I did was cut down one of the storage facilities, and that gave me enough space on my requirements to make everything. Okay, so we got 3 storage facilities. And now we're going to do 6 of each instead of 8 because we have 3 of our P4s here. So let's do our P4s actually while I'm talking about it. So I put these off to the side here. Remember, we get 6 hops everywhere. And then our advanced. So these are our P3, these are our worker bees here. And there's going to be 6 per. Now if you've already looked, we're going to make recursive computing modules which require 3 different P3s. Like I said a few minutes ago, I don't know if in case you skipped through it, 5 out of the 8 P4s require 3 P3s. The other 3 that the examples were earlier only require 2 plus a P1, which you don't need to use a factory for. So this is the most, what they call the AZ part of PI, is this setup. And just clicking, keeping everything close. I know these aren't pretty, they're not perfectly aligned or anything, but they get the job done. And they're fairly close. The nice thing about PI is after this is set up, you don't have to touch it again. Once you've ensured that your routes are running, you check back in a couple hours and everything looks good. You don't have an overflow in one of your storage facilities and all of your launch pads have the same amount of P4 in them, then you're good. Alright, so this is our setup. This is what it looks like. 3 launch pads, 3 storage facilities. 6, I group them out like this because it's easier to differentiate what I'm going to be making. So 6 per P3. The 3 P3s that we need for recursive computing modules are guidance systems, synthetic synapses, and transcranial microcontrollers. So first submit, and then we need to do our links between each one. Remember, it's just control click and then release control and click the next one. So control, release. Go ahead and go do all these. Alright, that's all you need. You don't need to move these together, link them up, or anything like that. It's not necessary. It's just a waste of PG and CPU. As you can see, pretty close to the limits here. So when you get to the larger planets, all you need to do, what I do anyway, is just delete this storage facility right here, and then I move this P4 into that spot and just keep the route lines the same. It's just that simple. Then you ask, okay, so where does this P3 get routed to? If it doesn't get routed to this one, well, you just put it all in this one, or you can split it between the two. It doesn't matter. Alright, so now we need to just do our little double-clicking setup. Again, we're making recursive computing modules right there. Double-click, double-click. So each launch pad is responsible for one of these P4 factories. So this one goes here. And the far right one goes in the middle. I mean, you can do whatever you want. And you see I messed up and didn't click on the route. So all we need to do, you can either like this and then double click again. There you go. Just be careful of your misclicks. And then this final one here on the far right. Okay, so our P4 is routed to where I want it to go. Submit. So just double check. See, 1, 2, 3, and we're good. So let's start doing our routes for our different P3s. First one's going to be guidance systems. Again, just double click and we'll hit G. And again, we're routing, each one goes to their respective one. So guidance systems, I'm going to put here. And then synthetic synapses, this group here, I'm going to put in the middle. And then our final one, transcranial microcontrollers, I'm going to put on the far right. So that way it makes it easy to identify routing issues. So let's say this one has like it's quarter full and all these are empty. I know I have a problem with my guidance system routing. Or these two, sorry, I would have a problem with these two being routed or not being routed to these facilities. It's just an easier way to break things up. So let's go ahead and do the routing. Again, it's just double click on everything. And my keys don't want to work today. Alright, guidance systems are done, so let's move on to the next one, and that is synthetic synapses. So one of the things that I hear as far as biggest complaints about PI are time requirements. Those time requirements specifically being in figuring out how much items or of each P2 you need to do this, best ways to supply it, all those things. That does take a lot of time, especially with buy orders if you don't know exactly how much you need. So that was wrong if you saw there, so we'll go back. So over the last year or so that I've been doing PI, I have made a spreadsheet, and that's now for sale, that basically answers all those questions. I have a video that shows exactly how that's done. Just look in my channel and you'll find it. I think it's called Planetary Interaction Guide. And that will really cut down on your time on figuring out what you need to do after setup. So next on our final one is our transcranial microcontrollers, and they're going to go here in this far right storage facility. So when I'm setting up a new character, I usually take a break every 2 or 3 planets, especially if I'm doing one of the more complicated P2 to P4 setups like this, just because it's so much left clicking and double clicking. It just really starts to hurt. So CCP, if you're watching, please fix that. Alright, so we have everything routed. Again, double check by just going over each one. So our spaceports should be routed 1 per P4 over here. And then our storage facilities should be routed 6 of these per. So there's a whole group is there, that's good. A whole group and that whole group, so we're good. Submit. Now we need to bring in our P2 and do the P2 routing, and then we'll be done. So switch over to our epithal again. Again, if you skip through the guide, here's the epithal fit again. You don't need any extra skills to set that up if you're a Galente character. So if you're making a PI alt, I highly recommend you make a Galente PI alt. And here we go. So again, we're going to go to the planet, turn on our shields. So customs office, not the planet. If you go to the planet, you usually land about 100 off, and that sucks. You have to warp away and then warp back. It takes time. So once you have all this set up, we can talk about time while we're in warp here. Let's say we have our 5 characters, like my guide talks about, 5 characters doing this. How long does it actually take to haul this stuff around? Now, if you're doing this in perimeter, you're in luck. You can be docked or based out of the I Choose You market and just run back and forth. You can buy a PI out of there and ship it out. it takes about 6 to 8 minutes to run an entire character's worth of PI. So 5 planets takes about 6 to 8 minutes. And that's it per day. And there's no hauling cost, there's no hauling time that you're waiting on like jump freighters to go to, like say for me, I'm way out in horde space, so I have a bunch of jump freighter jumps to get to me. And I don't have to worry about that if I'm in perimeter. And again, taxes are super cheap now. So we dropped it off and then we get out of there quickly. Nice thing about the fit is if you get one dude in here just trying to mess with you, just keep your alts, your PI alts in an NPC corp so you're not war decked. And you got the stabs here that'll keep you generally through one guy. There's still warp off. And unless he's trying to like single blap you in a tornado, you have around 11.5 to 12.5 EHP, or 12,500. So you'll live through small shit till Concord blows him up. Alright, so there we go. Now we just need to drop each one into their planet. So we have 6 different P2 inputs and 3 launch pads. So there's 2 different ways you can do this. If you want to run like 28-hour cycles, you do 2 P2s into each launch pad and split it up that way because there would be more of the P2. If you want to do what I do, which is just 24 hours, I just put 3 into each launch pad, and that's enough. And then that last one stays empty. It just fills up with P4, and you just bring the P4 up to the POCO every day, and that's it. So you don't really need the 3rd storage facility unless you're going to do something big like integrity response drones or wetware mainframes that take 9 P2s instead of 6. This way, the reason I leave that storage facility there is if I ever need to change from recursive computing modules over to one of those 2, I already have the infrastructure completely set up. Alright, so we are good to go. So now we need to know what needs to be put in where. So our first one here, our guidance systems, we have water-cooled CPUs and transmitters. So if you remember, everything's sorted alphabetically when you drop them in. So it's in that second group. And it's just a bunch of double clicking again. So double click on the water and we create our routes to each one. Just back and forth. So you get pretty used to doing this, and you move all your windows close to everything so that way you have less mouse movement, which makes it quicker. Again, efficiency. And then our other input we had was transmitters. Here we go. So you can see once you're used to doing the double clicking, it really doesn't take that much time to set it all up. So that's one group there. And we're not going to submit until we have all of them done because we don't want these factories running while these ones are waiting. So here we need super tensile and test cultures, so we need one from each. So test cultures here. I really don't like these buildings, the rotating buildings that kind of get in the way of everything. They don't really add much because who sits there and stares at a planet all day outside of setting up a factory? As you can see, it kind of see how it covers up our factories that we're using. Alright, super tensile plastics. Just double click, double click, double click. Alright, and then it's 2 down. Look at that, we're already done. So I know that I already used 3. There's some common sense here. I already used the 3 that are in this spaceport. So I know that the final 2 are going to be in this spaceport, and I know it's not super tensile plastics because those were there. So process of elimination makes it easier and quicker for us to do all of our routing. If you notice, I put this little window, the launchpad window, right on the edge, just because it makes it quicker. Instead of, say, putting it way out here, then I have to move my mouse all the way over here. That's just a giant pain in the ass. And I messed it up anyway. So here we go, and we're almost done. So one thing we haven't done yet is routed our P3 from these storage facilities into the P4. So we can actually go ahead and click submit, since this whole group, this is one section, right? The P2 section is running and set up. Now we're setting up the entire P3 to P4 section. So that's, again, super easy. We have one P3 in each of these storage facilities. So create route and double click, and we do it to each of the P4 factories. There we go. Let's do it to the next one. So I forgot how many I had done when I was moving the window around, just the one. So I keep the same pathway. I always do top to bottom, left to right. So top to bottom, left to right. That way if I ever forget or I get lost, I can pick up where I left off pretty quickly and be pretty confident that I'm not going to mess up my routes. Alright, and there we go. And the final one. So let's check. So each one should have its group and then be routed to the three P4s here. So 1, 2, and 3. Look at that. Pretty cool. So we're good. And then our P4 should be routed, each one to the spaceport to get out of there. So our setup is good. Hit submit. And now when these P3s get routed in here, we don't have to touch anything. It'll go here and then automatically drop into here. So let's talk troubleshooting for a second. So let's say that you have these two storage facilities are half full of P3, but these guys are blinking like they are right now. Your P4 factories are blinking, and this one's empty. So what does that mean? What that means is that these two are functioning correctly, or at least somewhat. If you have equal numbers, let's say 200 in each of these, so 200 guidance systems and 200 whatever these were, synthetic synapses, and we have no transcranial microcontrollers in here, what that means is that there's routing issues here. So we might be getting a few in, so maybe the routing is good for a couple of them, but not all of them. So we'd go here on our routes tab here and scroll down. We'd count our incomings to make sure that there's 6, and then if there is 6, that means we dual routed on accident. So that means we put a route here, we clicked and created a route to this, and then we went and created another route, a duplicate route to that same thing, and then we skipped over one of these factories. So you just go through, make sure it's routed, go to the next one, it's routed, so on and so forth, and eventually you'll find one that's red and it says not routed, and there's your problem. So it's pretty much the only problem you're going to run into with PI routing, and then I always recommend coming back 2 hours after you've set them up. So you should have a full cycle going into your P4 at that time, and then the next cycle is queued up. So that's where you can start to identify any routing problems and fix any mistakes before anything gets too bad and you lose money. So the whole input cost here per planet, I think was, let's see, I know it's around 500 million for 5 planets, so 100 million a planet for P2. And your profits are generally 80 to 140 million a day on top of that. So that's what you come out making without any hauling costs, because we're in perimeter. We can just come over to JITA and drop it off. Or even better yet, you could sell it in the I Choose You market here because it's got the 0.1% broker's fee, which saves you even more money to basically counteract your empire tax that you're paying on the POCOs. So that's it. That's really all you need to do for PI doing a P2 to P4 chain. Those are the two different options that are efficient, quick, and somewhat lazy. Just if you had something like my spreadsheet to basically tell you what you need to buy, that saves you even more time. And I'll tell you, for me, with my 8 characters, I spend an hour hauling. So again, 6 to 8 minutes per character of 5 planets. That's 8 times 5, so 40 planets in an hour of just hauling the P2 and the P4 to and from my Citadel to the respective POCOs and back. And then I run my own jump freighter. This is actually my jump freighter here. And I'll I'll go back and forth with that guy, and that takes some time. But if I have my stuff in perimeter, then I don't have to worry about that. And then buy orders, which is just another thing. I mean, buy orders take time, or you can just buy from G to sell and still usually make a profit. Just looking at my spreadsheet right now, the lowest profit you can get if you buy all of your P2 at G to sell, and then you were to sell all of your P4 back at G to sell prices, you would not lose any money on any of the P4s as of the making of this video. You would make at the least 6.75% profit on that. One is self-harmonizing power cores, and the most profit you would make would be 17.63. That's 17.63% on recursive computing modules. The ones that we just made right there in that demo on Planet 2 has a 17 point whatever percent profit. Even that's buying my P2 at G to sell prices. So that's crazy. Good for me, I guess. Maybe I'll do that. So if you have more interest in the spreadsheet, check it out in my video and the link down below. I've also got it for sale also in the comments below. And I hope this was informative. Thanks a lot.